Chapter 17 of Zadig. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Zadig, or the Book of Fate, by Voltaire. Chapter 17. The Hermit. As Zadig was traveling along, he met with the Hermit, whose gray and venerable beard descended to his girdle. He had in his hand a little book, on which his eyes were fixed. Zadig threw himself in his way and made him a profound bow. The Hermit returned the compliment with such an air of majesty and benevolence that Zadig's courtesy prompted him to converse with so agreeable a stranger. "Pray, sir," said he, "what may be the contents of the treatise you are reading with such attention?" "'Tis called," said the Hermit, "the Book of Fate." "Will you please to look at it?" He put the book into the hands of Zadig, who, though he was a perfect master of several languages, couldn't decipher one single character. This raised his curiosity still higher. "You seem dejected," said the good father to him. "Alas, I have cause enough," said Zadig. "If you'll permit me to accompany you," said the old Hermit, "perhaps I may be of some service to you. I have sometimes instilled sentiments of consolation into the minds of the afflicted." Zadig had a secret regard for the air of the old man, for his beard and his book. He found by conversing with him that he was the most learned person he had ever met with. The Hermit harangued on destiny, justice, morality, the sovereign good, the frailty of nature, on virtue and vice, in such a lively manner and in such a flow of words that Zadig was attached to him by an invincible charm. He begged earnestly that he would favor him with his company to Babylon. "That favor I was going to ask myself," said the old man. "Swear to me by Orosmades that you won't leave me, for some days at least. Let me do what I please." Zadig took the oath required, and both pursued their journey. The two travelers arrived that evening at a superb castle. The Hermit begged for an hospitable reception of himself and his young comrade. The porter, whom any one might have taken for some grandee, let them in, but with a kind of coldness and contempt. However, he conducted them to the head steward, who went with them through every rich apartment of his master's house. They were seated at supper afterwards at the lower end indeed of the table, and where they were taken little or no notice of by the host. But they were served with as much delicacy and profusion as any of the other guests. When they arose from the table they washed their hands in a golden basin set with emeralds and other costly stones. When 'twas time to go to rest, they were conducted into a bedchamber richly furnished, and the next morning 2 pieces of gold were presented to him for their mutual service by a valet in waiting, and then they were dismissed. "The proprietor of this castle," said Zadig, as they were upon the road, "seems to me to be a very hospitable gentleman, though somewhat too haughty indeed, and too imperious." The words were no sooner out of his mouth but he perceived that the pocket of his comrade's garment, though very large, was swelled and greatly extended. He soon saw what was the cause, and that he had clandestinely brought off the golden laver. He durst not immediately take notice of the fact, but was ready to sink at the very thought. About noon the Hermit rapped at a petty cottage with his staff, the beggarly residence of an old rich miser. He desired that he and his companion might refresh themselves there for a few hours. An old shabby domestic let them in indeed, but with visible reluctance, and carried them into the stable, where all their fare was a few musty olives and a draught or two of sour small beer. The Hermit seemed as content with his repast as he was the night before. At last, rising off from his seat, he paid his compliments to the old valet, who had as watchful an eye over them all the time as if they had been a brace of thieves, and intimated every now and then that he feared they would be benighted, and gave him the 2 pieces of gold he had but just received that morning as a token of his gratitude for his courteous entertainment. He added, moreover, I would willingly speak 1 word with your master before I go. The valet, thunderstruck at his unexpected gratuity, complied with his request. Most hospitable sir, said the hermit, I couldn't go away without returning you my grateful acknowledgments for the friendly reception we have met with this afternoon. Be pleased to accept this golden basin as a small token of my gratitude and esteem. The miser started, and was ready to fall down backwards at the sight of so valuable a present. The hermit gave him no time to recover out of his surprise, but marched off that moment with his young comrade. Father, said Zadig, what is all this that I have seen? You seem to me to act in a quite different manner from the generality of mankind. You plunder one who entertained you with all the pomp and profusion in the world, to enrich a covetous, sordid wretch who treated you in the most unworthy manner. Son, said the old man, that grandee who receives visits of strangers with no other view than to gratify his pride and to raise their astonishment at the furniture of his palace, will henceforward learn to be wiser, and the miser to be more liberal for the time to come. Don't be surprised, but follow me. Zadig was at a stand at present, and couldn't well determine whether his companion was a man of greater wisdom than ordinary, or a madman. But the hermit assumed such an ascendancy over him, exclusive of the oath he had taken, that he couldn't tell how to leave him. At night they came to a house very commodiously built, but neat and plain, where nothing was wanting, and yet nothing profuse. The master was a philosopher that had retired from the busy world in order to live in peace and form his mind to virtue. He was pleased to build this little box for the reception of strangers in a handsome manner, but without ostentation. He came in person to meet them at the door, and for a time advised them to sit down and rest themselves in a commodious apartment. After some respite, he invited them to a frugal yet elegant repast, during which he talked very intelligently about the late revolutions in Babylon. He seemed entirely to be in the queen's interest, and heartily wished that Zadig had entered the lists for the regal prize. But Babylon, said he, doesn't deserve a king of so much merit. A modest blush appeared in Zadig's face at this unexpected compliment, which innocently aggravated his misfortunes. It was agreed on all hands that the affairs of this world took sometimes a quite different turn from what the wisest patriots would wish them. The hermit replied, the ways of Providence are often very intricate and obscure, and men were much to blame for casting reflections on the conduct of the whole upon the bare inspection of the minutest part. The next topic they entered upon was the passions. Alas, said Zadig, how fatal in their consequences! However, said the hermit, they are the winds that swell the sail of the vessel. Sometimes 'tis true they overset it, but there is no such thing as sailing without them. Phlegm, indeed, makes men peevish and sick, but then there is no living without it. Though everything here below is dangerous, yet all are necessary. In the next place their discourse turned on sensual pleasures, and the hermit demonstrated that they were the gifts of heaven. For, said he, man cannot bestow either sensations or ideas on himself. He receives them all. His pain and pleasure, as well as his being, proceed from a superior cause. Zadig stood astonished to think how a man that had committed such vile actions could argue so well on such moral topics, At the proper hour, after an entertainment not only instructive but every way agreeable, their host conducts